Welcome to Run with Purpose. This is episode number 70. And for those of you that are new to the show, my name is Flores, and I'm so very glad you found this podcast. Would love if you would subscribe. And as always, you can reach out to me on all of the socials at flores.run. We have a fun episode today. I think it's going to be an inspirational story. I think we're going to get a lot out of a story from our guest today. We met on Clubhouse, like you've heard from a few of my guests recently, went on a Clubhouse bonanza and just started saying, who wants to be on my show? Who wants to talk to me? Let's do this. And this is no different. So yeah, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me today, Anna.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a good conversation. Hopefully people get stuff out of your story. I think they will. If they don't, they're not listening and they need to listen to this episode again. Maybe this is the second time they're hearing me say that. But
take what they will.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I don't want to waste any time and kind of like jump right into it. So if you can let the listeners know maybe a little bit more about yourself and then kind of jump into your story as well.
Of course. Yes. So my name is Anna Cantor, and wow. I will do the elevator pitch as you put it. And my story comes from, it started about a decade ago. My mother was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's and frontal temporal lobe dementia when she was 56 years old. And I was in my, mid to late 20s and living abroad. And I moved home to be her caretaker. And it really just changed my life. I pretty much was her full-time caregiver for about 4 years until her disease progressed. And I felt it was kind of out of my capacity to care for her and moved her into a memory home. The last 10 years have been just being her advocate and her care manager. And last year I decided to pursue a certificate in life coaching and become a dementia care consultant. And I've put these pieces together, kind of these pieces of the puzzle, to find purpose in what would have been otherwise, kind of a life fraught with sadness and despair and regret in a way. And now I have a consulting company and I coach caregivers on kind of finding their path while they're dealing with challenges with Alzheimer's and dementia. And that's pretty much my story.
I think it's super inspiring because I actually have a friend as well that in really similar situation. Her mom was diagnosed with Alzheimer's and she was doing the same kind of thing as a caregiver. And unfortunately, her mom had passed away. It's probably been 5 or 6 years ago now, but it was the same kind of idea of trying to have, I won't say have your own life, but find yourself while you're also kind of giving so much of yourself. And, obviously fast forwarding here, you were able to turn that experience and be like, hey, how can I help others going through similar circumstances and situations? But what was that? Was there like a specific moment or something that kind of sparked this of, hey, obviously you said it became a little outside of the care that you could provide. So you kind of had to have that little bit of separation. But what made you kind of click knowing that, hey, maybe I can be a life coach and kind of support people that are going through this as well?
So it was almost a long journey. It has always been in the back of my mind on how I could use my experiences for the greater good and to help others. And I think that's the only thing that really gave me a sense of purpose and worth as I was going through my mom's diagnosis. And so people would turn to me for guidance and comfort. And, after she went to her home, where I had been a caregiver for about 4 years, I kind of had a void and I didn't really know how to fill that void anymore. So I went through a few different career changes. I was an advocate engagement manager for a company and an executive assistant. And those were really stable jobs, but at the same time, I was looking for how to give back to this community. And I think the most powerful thing was hearing other people's stories who were in the same position as I was years ago and feeling like they didn't have support. They didn't know where to turn. They didn't have somebody to guide them or somebody to coach them, and they were also kind of losing a sense of their identity, because all of a sudden you go from being a child to being a caregiver. And it's such an interesting dynamic shift that needs to, really be attended to carefully. And so, they were going through these shifts and they didn't know where to turn. They didn't know who to look to. And I was able to say, I've been there. I've seen this. I can give you perspective and insight. And so it wasn't kind of this aha moment where I thought, oh, I'm going to be a consultant and a life coach. I really kind of have COVID to thank for, a little more free time, a little more downtime in order for me to sort of do some research and get the education and the certifications I needed to pursue this. But I almost think of it as kind of a 10-year journey that led me to where I am today. Just the pieces of the puzzle just really came together.
Yeah. I mean, you make a good point there. Your experiences are really what's making you successful now and being able to help other people, because without those experiences, it's just another piece of paper, that you're certified to be a life coach. And it's just another thing that you could have done. It could have just been another job. But because you had that experience, you kind of give people a little bit, I don't say you have skin in the game, but you understand what people are going through in these circumstances. And you can talk from real world experiences, not just, textbook ideas.
Right. Exactly. And I think that it does give me sort of the leverage, to bring, my wisdom and insight. And I notice, especially on social media, how many, what are so-called millennial caregivers out there. And I think typically people think of Alzheimer's and dementia as happening a lot later in life, but it's really prevalent in, what's now, I guess the baby boomer generation of people that are in their 60s and 70s are being diagnosed with early onset. So their children who are in their 20s are feeling the need to stay home and take care of their parent at such a young age, where what are you supposed to be doing in your 20s? Graduating from college, pursuing a master's degree, traveling, just finding yourself and finding your direction. And all of a sudden you're kind of pulled into this new, you're pulled into a different realm. And so I think, and on top of that, it's how do you find her purpose in this, and one thing that really helped me find my purpose was to really stop thinking of it as I'm a victim and I've been, my mom, of course it's sad. And of course it's devastating that, your loved one has this disease and they lose themselves and it's so hard. But I really, really tried the best I could to kind of get out of that victim mentality and to really turn it into something that could be uplifting. And that didn't come easy. It came with a lot of, help and, therapy and coaching and guidance and, just realizing that at the end of the day, I feel so much better turning this into a positive than being stuck on what I don't have. My mom is still here with us and she's in a home, but she's the very, very, very late stages of her dementia journey and she's on hospice care. But it's like, instead of saying what I don't get to do with her, I think, what do I get to do with her? I get to go, we get to listen to music, I get to sit with her, I get to read to her. But it's just, I think it's just really changed my mindset and how I look at and how I appreciate things around me. So that's one of the biggest takeaways I've had from my journey.
Yeah, I can imagine, because when we originally were talking on Instagram, you said that victim kind of thing. And I think a lot of people sit with that, where it's to your point, if you're in your 20s and you're supposed to be living life and finding yourself and figuring out who you are as a person. And then next thing you know, you're having to, take care of a family member. Again, a sad situation that, you don't wish that on anyone, but it's hard to not sometimes get out of that almost like selfish mentality of, well, where do I fit into this and what's happening with me? And sometimes you see that with like if you have siblings or anything like that, or other family members, it's like, why aren't they taking care? Like, why am I having to do all of this? And it can fall into that. But I think your mindset shift is kind of the key part there, right? It's this idea of, what do I get to do? Not what am I missing out on? What am I blessed to have the opportunity to still do? And, to kind of be there, like you said, those experiences have now led you to where you are today.
Yeah. And a lot of the individuals that I'm working with, I try to make it very clear that it is very important that they still pursue their passions and they still have a specific, drive in life besides taking care of their loved one, if there's something they wanted to do. And my purpose is really to give them back the bandwidth in order to do that. So some of the, behind the scenes administrative tasks, looking for a long-term care facility or dealing with challenging behaviors is something that I can step in and coach them on. So it's easier so that they feel like they have kind of the mental, or they have, the bandwidth and the energy to approach what was their purpose and what was their passions, without their caregiving sort of getting in the way of that. And so a lot of it is, restoring this balance and this harmony in their lives that they lost because, they feel responsible for this other person. So I just really try to step in and do as much as I can, on their behalf, but also give them the tools in order to sort of find a greater good in everything, find a reason behind it and, get rid of that victim mentality. And it's true because you do want to put blame on people and you want to say, well, I have siblings. Why aren't they stepping in? And I think understanding also the grief process or, why some people kind of step up as, care partners and some people sort of avoid that. And I had to deal that with my own family. I have 2 brothers and it just fell on my shoulders. And I look back at that time in my life and it was 2010 to 2014 was when I was caring for my mom. And I kind of look back at these emails that I wrote my family and they were just filled with bitterness and resentment and almost to the fact that it really could have torn my family apart. And there's a statistic out there that it's about 4 in 5 families will suffer and will be torn apart from dementia and Alzheimer's. 4 out of 5 families, which means one family kind of remains. And I don't really know the definition of torn apart. I don't know if it means, they don't talk to each other anymore or they kind of go separate ways, but, so it's very objective or subjective, but, I think that my brothers and I somehow maintained this really strong bond. After that, I realized I'm going to thank them for what they are giving me. I'm going to thank them for the support that they are giving me. I'm going to, they all have different levels of grief and they all are vulnerable in different ways. And I think that some of them, they had to retreat in order to kind of preserve their integrity around losing my mom and losing their mother. And, and so I just look back at these emails and I don't regret writing them, but it also propels me into this, into this vision going forward of, getting out of that mindset where I do feel targeted and I need to kind of lash out at people because I'm hurt, I'm upset and I'm sad. And so I know there's so many, consulting companies out there that help with families with dementia, but I think the coaching part of it is so vital because it gives you really the tools to shift your mindset in case these issues come up in the future. So I just, want to set people up for success in how they handle feelings of sadness and devastation.
Yeah, I think there's 2 things in there that I had to write down because they're just really good about how you broke them down. The first one, which was the latest one, is this idea of everyone kind of grieves differently and everyone kind of handles situations like this differently. I remember many moons ago, my now wife's grandfather had passed away, and I had never dealt with any sort of loss that was close to me. Like everyone's been, people that were in their 90s, hundreds, and it's like, well, yes, this is about time that people die. So yes, that makes sense to me. But I was super young when this happened, and I didn't know how to handle that situation. And I remember it was such a battle between us because I didn't know how to react to her. Like, do I not bring it up? Do we talk about old times? Because I had never met him. And I was like, how do you kind of go through this? And I can imagine in a situation like you coach and you were going through yourself, this idea of when you're in the thick of it, it seems like no one else is caring. Why am I the only one caring? Why is it only affecting me? When in reality, it's affecting everyone. Your brothers were also affected, but it's just how they were able to show it to kind of, for lack of a better term, keep their shit together. Like how do they hold themselves together in these circumstances? Because that's probably more of my thing. It's, I hope my parents are around for a lot longer, but when that time does come, I think I'm going to be that kind of person where it's going to be like, I'm going to hold it all in. And that's not necessarily healthy in most cases, but it's when those things kind of happen, how do you react? And I think you make a great point of understanding that and knowing that, hey, people are different in this is where that coaching piece comes in. Because sometimes if you just have grief counselors and stuff like that, they're telling you the textbook answers of how you should feel. Let it out, let your emotions go. And some people that's not necessarily what people want.
Yeah, that is so true. That's such a good point, how everybody handles grief differently. And I think, as a society, we are a long ways away from being able to, teach or being able to coach people on how to handle grief. I think that, there's so many different types of grief. There's, with Alzheimer's and dementia, it's what it is it's anticipatory grief because you're losing someone each day. A little part of them is dying and what they can and can't do. And then there's, everyone reacts to it differently. Some people might need a lot of comfort. Some people might need to be alone and feel isolated. Some people, and that's another thing that I am extremely passionate about learning more on is working with, grief and trauma coaches and counselors in order to, be a better asset to the people that I'm coaching and my clients, or either like referring them to somebody who might have more knowledge and information and insight into, grief and loss and trauma. So I think I had to recognize that, I had an older brother who was pursuing he was in dental school, and my younger brother moved away to California to, be with his wife and her family. And I now reflect back and think that they were sort of my younger brother was preserving himself, and he didn't really know how to be vulnerable around my mom and see her decline so rapidly. And it doesn't mean that they cared less. And it doesn't mean that they were, I was actively doing more, book work, but I don't have any grudges. I'm not remorseful about it. I'm just like, yeah, exactly. The more I learn about, the grief process, the more I can, understand and really respect their decisions at the time and respect what they needed. So, yeah. And it's the challenge. Yeah. The challenge with working with clients who are care partners is understanding how they respond and react to grief and, really, coaching them and giving them some tools on whatever their specific, personality is. Maybe they tune inward and maybe they need to journal, maybe they need to, exercise to let their grief come out. Maybe they need to talk to somebody. Maybe they need to kind of internalize it, and then process it later. So, yeah, it's hard. And I hope that, I think there's a lot of good resources out there. And I think navigating those is also something that I, like to assist with and guide people on.
Yeah. I mean, and then the other point kind of goes along. It's like you're reading my notes. Do you have like a special camera right here? Cause it's just, you're literally going through my next thing I wrote down.
No, I didn't.
The idea.
My elves are off duty today.
They're reporting back. This idea of kind of giving your clients and the people you work with like balance and kind of giving them some of that back where it's, hey, you know, I can see it being overwhelming with everything you have to do, especially, you know, with long-term facilities and then planning and then understanding, like you said, every day it's just a little worse than the previous day. And how do you kind of manage that in your sanity, but, you know, and then again, pursue your own passions and your desires and everything you kind of want to accomplish in life and not wrapping your identity up in that specifically. But this idea of giving people the tools to understand how to get that balance. I think that's the biggest piece, because we can always tell people it's like, hey, this isn't who you are. You aren't this specific thing, or you shouldn't have your identity tied with like a title or something like that. But it's when you give people the tools to be like, oh no, this is how I can actually bring some space into my life, bring a little bit of freedom and balance into it. You said earlier, talking about, you know, as much bad that COVID has done, which obviously anybody listening to this understands that it hasn't been a walk in the park the last 14 months. That being said, there's been a lot of good things that have come out of it, from kind of reflection and kind of personal growth of understanding what is most valuable to you, and probably realizing that those things that are most valuable to you aren't things at all. It's the relationships you have, it's the experiences you have and create. And I think being able to, again, reframe that victim mentality, you know, we could all sit here with everything of, what do you mean I have to sit inside, you know, wearing a mask and can't see anybody else with my family? Like, I want to strangle my family. Like, no, I don't want to, like, please let me out of the house. But you have this, like, it kind of, we could have had that victim mentality. It's like, poor me in this situation. But I think a lot of us, because of the amount of time we had to sit in it, kind of realize, like, oh, wait a second, like, let's count the blessings I have. It could be a lot worse for me. And it has been a lot worse for families and stuff. Like with Hangry, we deal with food insecurity and that sort of thing. And those numbers are growing through the roof. And it's all because of this. And it's like, how can we kind of count our blessings, but at the same point in time, how can we give back to those that are in need at this moment?
Yes, so many good points. Yeah, I think just, you know, focusing on personal growth has been sort of the key message of the past 14 months. And, you know, I try to, one thing that really helped me in my mindset shift is, you know, not wanting from a place of scarcity, but wanting from a place of abundance. And when you want from a place of abundance, it really allows you to focus on what you do have. You know, if you say, oh, I wish I had this and I wish I had this, and I think of, I have this already, you know, and it's not, I don't want something because I am not fulfilled and I'm not content. I want it because it's going to uplift me, or it's going to, you know, give me a greater sense of value. So I think, first of all, I think that's just, I love that message, just wanting from a place of abundance and not from scarcity. And with coaching people on, you know, maintaining their passions and their drive and their goals, it really has to be small. It has to be small, or else it's overwhelming. And that's another thing I say, okay, what do you have right now? Okay, well, they have, you know, do you have any time to journal? Do you have any time to take a walk? Do you have any time to appreciate nature? And just those really small baby steps in order to, you know, invite sort of that positivity, you know, back into their lives. I think I also, I'm a certified yoga instructor, and I offer clients yoga courses if they work with me. So I'm also really love talking about yoga in a way that speaks to the masses and isn't too, you know, overwhelming for people. I don't expect somebody to, you know, curl up like a pretzel right away. So, but I think just, you know, offering them a little sanctuary where we can chat one-on-one, and they have a friend, they have someone, you know, holding their hand through the process. is just helps them in so many ways. And on top of that, I can, offer them that guidance and, the yoga if they need that. But then if they have certain challenges with their loved one, offering them coaching and consulting on how to deal with those certain behaviors or those, communication styles that you need when interacting with somebody with dementia, because it is so different than just interacting with somebody who has a healthy working brain and healthy cognitive function. But back to what you mentioned about just COVID giving you a sense of, reestablishing freedom or reestablishing balance and kind of reflecting. And it's been quite a journey, right? In the last 14 months there was times that I had 2 kids were out of daycare working and just a lot of craziness. And it's okay. I think that's another thing. It's okay to be, kind of upset in that moment and be unorganized and to be frazzled and to feel like you're at your wit's end and, want to go away and sleep in a tent for a night because then you have some peace and quiet and tranquility. Maybe not a tent. I mean, I remember, going and sitting in my car just in the front in the driveway or taking a meeting from the car because it was the most peaceful place I could find.
It's quiet in here.
Yeah. And it takes hard work. I mean, it's a mindset shift. It takes work, like just like anything in life, just like, training for marathons or working up to a yoga pose. It takes practice. So I don't want clients to feel like it's daunting and it's not achievable, because it is attainable to find that balance and to reestablish your purpose.
Yeah, I think one piece you kind of said, and we've hinted on it a few times, is this idea of sometimes the goals or the ideas can be kind of far off. Like they can seem too big for us to do. Running a marathon, getting into a yoga pose. There are certain things when I tried to do yoga, I see the guy, like I use like Daily Burn and stuff, and he does that. I'm like, yeah, you go ahead and do that, bro. I'm going to sit here. I'm just going to watch you and I'm going to wait for the next one. Like I'll do child's pose. Like I could do that. Like I could just sit some places if that's what you need me to do. But we have these things where we always try to go 0 to 100. And we forget that in order to get there, you have these little steps along the way. I'm dealing with an injury right now and I haven't been able to run. And it's aggravating me beyond belief. Like, I just want to go run. And I'm like, all right, tell me all of the exercises I need to do right now. I will do all of them. And then I can start running again. They're like, no. It's going to take some time. We need to build this up. And that's really everything in life. And in these circumstances, like you said, is you don't want your clients to kind of feel like it's too much of a task, so they just might as well just suck it up like, hey, it's going to suck and I'm just going to have to deal with it. And it doesn't have to be that. It's finding the purpose in those moments and knowing like, hey, every small little thing you do is another step towards whatever that end goal or end purpose is. But you have to make sure you are doing the little steps and kind of accepting those little wins, knowing that any little progress is still progress. And I think a lot of people kind of lose that mindset. Like you said, it's all a mindset shift, because if you don't have the right mindset with it, it's instantly going to turn back to that victim card, instantly turning back into, well, why can't I get this? Or, you go on social media, social media does a lot of great things. And people that listen to this podcast know that I've complained too much about social media, even though I'm always on it. But the idea of it, there's too much of a comparison. And when you're looking at someone else's Instagram reel and comparing it to your camera roll and wondering why they're not adding up. And it's like, well, it's because you're looking at the best of the things that they're going through. You don't see the day-to-day struggles that people are going through that kind of say, okay, here's my small steps and here's where I can get to a bigger picture.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. I like the thinking that something is too much of a task. And I think specifically when you have, when you're in a caregiving situation or in your care partner, what's really tricky is trying to adapt to the mind, to the cognitive ability not adapt to the cognitive ability, but be able to respond to situations appropriately because the person does have dementia. And it's almost like they revert back to this childlike state. So, I think celebrating the small wins and identifying what those wins are is really important for care partners. Because when you are caring for somebody with dementia, there are things that they do that are they kind of have this childlike innocence. So, being able to do artwork or something, or being able to just, go out in nature and smell flowers, you really have to take a step back and appreciate kind of those small things in life, because that might be all the stimulation they can have for that moment. And so it really allows you to appreciate kind of those small things and take a step back and, identifying those small wins, hour at a time or minutes at a time, and not look at the really big picture, because, that person really won't be able to improve and they won't be able to get better. But I think just working with what they have and what cognitive ability they have left and what cognitive function they still have is so important, and for the care partner to embrace that and to celebrate those small achievements and those milestones along the way.
Yeah, there's something about that I think when you get your mind wrapped around that concept of recognizing the small wins and kind of almost setting them up to make sure you have those small wins. When you get your mind around that, it's hard to understand why other people haven't yet. Because I've gotten to a point now in my life where I can kind of see those small things and go, okay, I can feel the blessing in it, and I can, feel that, hey, this is a win. I am taking a step forward in whatever it might be. But I do remember a time where that wasn't the case, where all I did was complain about everything and nothing was right. Everything was everybody else's fault. There was no light at the end of the tunnel. It was just a never-ending work pile. But I think once you just turn your mind, even if it's in something that's unrelated to what you're dealing with, once you kind of free your mind of that, I think it's hard to go back in anything you do, because then you quite realize, like, wait a second, like, I apply this concept to other areas of my life. In my case, it was really running that was doing it. And, I can apply it to running, but I can't apply it to my job. Well, that doesn't make any sense. Like, it's the same brain. I'm doing, in theory, the same mechanical motions of doing things. So why am I kind of playing the victim card in one part of my life and not the other? And it's like, oh, it's because you realize, no, there are small little wins or small little victories. And as you count those victories, you can then look back and go, look at everything I've done. Look at the people that I've helped. Look at each step along the way that has kind of made the biggest impact. I'm having that issue, I won't say issue right now, but with Hangry, it's like we were hoping for a lot more support than we have. And hear me, guys, those that are supporting, I'm not complaining. Thank you so much for your support. But we realized that, hey, we've made a huge impact, but we needed to kind of reshift it. And in reshifting it, you don't carry everybody with you. And that happens. But it's understanding, like, hey, no, we're still making a difference. And literally my wife today, she texts me, how much was it? I don't want to mess it up because I'll say a wrong number and then people call me out. They're like, but that's not what your Instagram said. We donated 343 pounds of food today to a food pantry. And that was after we did 550 or 580 last week. And the week before that was like another 500. It's like, we are making differences and we are doing these little pieces. But if I got so caught up of why don't I have 30 volunteers for an event that's in 3 months, and I'm not worried about like, hey, what we're doing right now. Yeah, you're just going to kind of live in that just bleh, and you're not going to kind of be your best you, which then in turn is going to affect everything else.
Right. Yeah. And I think a lot about focusing on, something that's good and something that's bad. I think that our brain naturally wants to kind of compartmentalize, all of our efforts. And so we constantly tell ourselves, well, I did really good in this, but then this, I was, inadequate. And I think that kind of going back to, it's kind of a learning process, and it's all about, I think your thoughts really create your results. And that's one thing we really learn, as a coach, is that the power of the mindset. So if you think about, it's not that why do I only have 30 volunteers, but wow, or we'll say we have 10 volunteers. Wow, why don't I have 30 volunteers? Instead of switch your thought and think, wow, I have 10 volunteers. That's amazing. So therefore your emotion around that is excitement. And then your results are going to be, excitement and, kind of a, gosh, am I allowed to say kick ass?
Yeah.
Attitude, and it's just, and I think even taking from things that what you shift your mindset, instead of it being a failure, it's a place of growth. And, just reshifting your mindset in order to change, your thoughts create emotions, and your emotions can create your results. And so kind of reflecting it to everything, to having that abundance and coming from a place of, positivity instead of negativity. And it takes a lot of practice. It takes a lot of practice, because I do that, I do that a lot too. I say, well, business is thriving, and yeah, I read 2 books, but I haven't gone to the gym in 2 weeks, and therefore I am a loser and I don't work out ever. And, but that's a generalization. Really, ever?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's tricky. We definitely want to put things in different buckets, and we have one bucket completely full and we feel really proud of that. And if our other bucket is, half empty, we feel inadequate.
Yeah. And I think you just said it right there, which kind of hits it, is this half empty idea. And you hear that all the time.
I did that on purpose.
Yeah.
I did that on purpose. I said half empty instead of half full.
Yeah. Oh, I caught it. I wrote it down. But this idea of I like that bucketed idea. We have our good things and our bad things. And kind of what our mind says is exactly what you said, is I've done all these great things. I've done all these great things, but then I also haven't done all these things. They don't cancel each other out. And I think that's where people, it's I've got 5 in this bucket, but I have 7 in the negative bucket. Therefore I'm in the negative bucket. That's not the case. They're both learning opportunities, whether you're growing or you're learning maybe what not to do and to turn and to grow. They're both positives if you reframe your mind to say they're positives. If you have that glass half full approach instead of half empty, you can kind of reshift that thinking and realize, no, every single thing is an opportunity. I've talked about it a ton of times, this idea of people running away from failure, and failure isn't a bad thing. I think it's a good thing. You need to fail to know where limits might be, or maybe how you need to adjust things to get better. Because if you go through your life and everything is just perfect, things aren't great. I mean, you see it with it's a weird example, but childhood actors and stuff like that. You have a Macaulay Culkin, where this guy was just doing everything he could possibly want, had more money than he knew what to do with. But then he grows up and he's not happy. He turns to all of these external kinds of things to bring him this happiness and this joy, because nothing is stimulating him anymore. And then you run into that where it's hey, not to say he would have, but if he had failed, would have it been better? Would have he come out of it stronger and maybe on the other side of things? I think about with Justin Bieber. I love me some Justin Bieber, but he went through some weird stuff, and it's how he's kind of turned it around, where he's now reflecting on that and going, yeah, that wasn't good for me. I could have saved a lot of pain and heartache in myself and my family members and my relationship and everything had I not done those things. But doing those things, I'm now turning it to good, because now I understand and I can tell people and I can help people in these circumstances.
Oh, wonderful. That's actually such a great tie-in and lead into something else I wanted to touch on. And that was giving, the listeners kind of an example of where, rewind to the beginning of this podcast and kind of what led me up to where I am today is I'm a very open book and I'm very transparent. And when I was caring for my mom, kind of imagine it as the worst version of myself. I was caring for her, but I wasn't happy. And I turned to some very bad habits. I mean, not, nothing like drugs or anything, but just some really bad spending habits, a really bad attitude, kind of a sense of entitlement. Mm. And I think it's because people around me were always saying, oh, you're doing such a good job with your mom. You deserve this. You earned this. You earned this gold star. And that was over a decade ago. And so I kind of brought that into my next phase of life into, marriage and other relationships. And I got into some really bad spending habits, and I wonder if I can teach people tools in order, like coping tools that, aren't around, instant gratification or just healthier coping mechanisms for something that they're going through that brings them, anxiety, such as, caring for somebody with dementia and Alzheimer's. I wonder if I can, give them a better, just better coping tools in their life, when other things come their way, and I think, I look back and I didn't do it perfectly. I mean, I was anything but really when I was a caregiver, because it was this label, this job that I really, really didn't want. I mean, if I had to be a caretaker now, I would have done it so much differently. But I almost want to tell people that, it might trigger certain things, it might trigger bad behavior and poor behavior and unhealthy behavior. And that's sort of what led me here. And I was, I started therapy when I was caring for my mom. I started taking antidepressants and anti-anxiety medicine. And I wonder if that was kind of a quick fix because, somebody wasn't able to coach me on really how to deal internally with those emotions instead of looking at the root of the problem. They just wanted to cover it up with a medication. So I feel, I think there's a benefit to, I won't get into the whole, Western versus Eastern medicine. That is not the point of this podcast.
That's part 2.
I'll just say, I do love both. I'm a ice cream, dairy eating, chicken eating, vegan pescatarian, so I got multiple personality written all over my face. So,
but I think it's interesting you bring that up of this. Bad habits come up because people kind of tell you deserve this because you're doing these things. And it goes into the idea of people are around you as you got thrown into this. Like you said, if you did things now with the information, you obviously would respond different. But in this case, it's like you're basically thrown into the situation of now I need to step in. I need to do something about this. And you don't really have time to consider options, if you will, and how am I going to react in this? So people's society as a whole, their idea of, well, you're doing a good thing, you need to be rewarded for said good thing. Not realizing that rewards come in different ways. Rewards aren't necessarily monetarily things or things you can buy or things you can consume, but they can be an array of things, like you said now, of like being able to whether it's like an art project or just going on a walk in outdoors or whatever with your mom, and like that idea is where rewards are. But I think people are so ingrained in our culture that in order to show someone you care or love them, or it's like they need things. It's like, hey, go shopping. You deserve this. Or, hey, you know what? You may not have the money for that, but you deserve it. Go buy that nice purse, or go go out to a nice dinner, or do whatever it is. And no, I totally get that. Like it wasn't even a situation like that with me, but it was one of those where I had money. I had a job where I was making good money, and I was just like, yeah, I earned this. I'm going to spend every last dime of it. And it makes me sick to my stomach to know how much money I made in college as a salesman at AT&T on commission, and like how much money I made I had none of it left. Like I had no savings, no 401k. I literally spent every single dime. And the worst part is I was living with either my family or a family friend. I had no rent. I had no other bills than gas. So it's just like, what was my thinking of just like, nope, I deserve to do all this. And I think when we kind of find our purpose is more than the things we can buy or things we consume, we can't find happiness in those things. That's when you kind of open up and realize like, okay, maybe there is something wrong. And then to your medication point of it, I think that is, it can be a struggle in a lot of things now. Is a lot of times these things are just used to oh, your kid can't pay attention, well, then they need to be on medicine. Or, you're feeling a certain way, we need to be on medicine. And yes, these things help because they're literally chemical changes in your body and your brain. However, they're not the right thing for all circumstances. And a lot of times it just gets blanketed into, if you're acting this way, then this. It's like, obviously see a medical professional for this, but unfortunately a lot of those people are getting kickbacks from the drug companies. So it's a vicious cycle.
It is. Yeah. And another thing I kind of like to be transparent about is that I do have, I think there is a benefit to having a therapist or a counselor. And I actually did not find, or not really, I did not really know what life coaching was until just recently. And it was because I was kind of in a place where I was kind of spiraling down. And I think COVID had a lot to do with this, where I was just so unhappy with life and my relationship and my marriage and my job. And I actually was trying to find a life coach, a grief and anxiety life coach. And in doing that, I never hired a life coach. I actually decided to do a certification to become a life coach instead, because I wanted to know more about it. And so one thing led to another. And I thought, well, I have been wanting to somehow coach people and consult with people who are caregivers. And it just led to another. And it just opened up all these doors. And in itself, it was almost my own therapy. It was so therapeutic for me to start on this path of learning and pursuing these certifications. And it was just kind of amazing how one thing led to another. And that's another example on just how I took this feeling of despair and discontentment and really turned it into a path of growth. And something clicked. And I think just kind of all the pieces of the puzzle came together. And I thought, wow, for the last decade, I've been dealing with my mom's situation. And I've been also coaching friends. And I have family members who they're uncles who have been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And so I've guided my cousins and I've guided friends, and I attend a support group monthly through the Alzheimer's Association. I attend the Washington chapter conference. And so I am present in the community, but now I have this vision going forward on coaching and consulting caregivers and giving them the tools to cope. And it really came from finding that for myself. And, it came from a place of just truth. And, I was just searching for, really searching for myself. And in that, I found a way to build this business. And it's been amazingly rewarding and fulfilling. So yeah, it's been amazing.
I think kudos to you, because just hearing your story, I mean, literally from the beginning of what we've been talking about, this idea of you stepping up and being a caretaker and taking care of your mom and the situation she needed, and then realizing, when it was your time to kind of take care of yourself, and obviously you were looking for help, and then said, the best way to help is to learn. And you kind of learned and did it. So definitely kudos to you, but kind of just putting it where you really need to be with it. And I think it's so hard sometimes for people to get honest and actually to say, no, this is what I need to do, or, oh, I need to make a change, or I need to just do something different, because, you can't do the same thing and expect a different result. It's just not going to happen. If you keep moving through the same way of life, keep doing the same things, keep hanging out with the same people, keep going to the same places, nothing's going to change. So how do you kind of disrupt that a little bit? And when you find that disruption, you can go, you're like, oh, wait a second. Maybe I found something here. Like you said, it's you were looking for a life coach, and now you are a life coach. And it's just how that story turns. And now, again, and I hate the quote of people say, if you find a job you love, or you'll never work in a day in your life, that's bullshit. You're going to probably work harder because you love it so much. But this idea of now, like you said, it's rewarding, it's fulfilling. It's kind of aligning, your purpose is aligning with your values, and everything you're doing is kind of just on that same playing field, where it's not that it's not hard work. you just don't mind putting in that hard work. You don't mind the later evenings or the earlier mornings or any of those situations, because you know it's aligning with everything you want to do. And like you said, your whole purpose of all of this stuff is helping people get through these situations that you are very much aware of, and you can kind of help give them that outlet.
Right. I love the mindset of just responsibility breeds empowerment, you know? So take responsibility for yourself, take responsibility for your actions, and you really will feel empowered. And that's the same thing that I love the definition of insanity is trying to do something over and over again and trying to get the same result, because I've definitely been there. And that's another thing. I think you come to a point where you can no longer do in the future what you've done in the past. And that is where true change comes in. That's where true insight can start to take its work, can start to do its job. And I started to find ways to just change my daily habits and my daily routine. And there are things that I stopped doing that I don't even miss. I mean, with pursuing the consulting, I did a course through a really well-known dementia. I call her kind of a dementia guru. Her name's Teepa Snow. And I am currently doing her course to become a consultant through her training. But at the end of the day, you know, after my kids go to bed, I don't watch Netflix anymore. And I'm not going to say I never watch Netflix. Of course, give me a good binge show and I love it. But I don't even miss it. You know, I want to learn and I want to grow. And like you said, it doesn't feel like a job. It really doesn't. It feels like something that I'm so passionate about. And that speaks volumes for me, especially as somebody who wasn't really sure what they were going to do with their life. I was never grew up thinking, I'm going to be this, I'm going to be that. You know, besides being, when I was really little, you know, I wanted to be an astronaut or a dancer or something like that. Obviously. But, you know, never really feeling like I had that sense of direction. And that's another thing. I mean, with the name of your podcast, Run with Purpose, my mom's diagnosis and her decline, and me seeing that decline and living with that decline and having a parent who doesn't know who you are, it's so sad, but I have found my purpose in that. I've found my purpose and I can give back to the community, and it feels really good. It feels really good.
Well, I appreciate everything you're doing, because you're doing amazing stuff, and I'm just super excited for people to kind of connect with you more and just learn more about you. So thanks for being on the show. But how can people get in touch with you if they want to learn more about what you're doing and everything like that?
Yes. So I have a Instagram account. You can find me at coach_Anna Cantor, CANTOR. And my website is coachannacantor.com. And I also you can email me at anna@coachannacantor.com. Kept it easy.
Made it nice, just nice and uniform throughout. That's always nice.
If you have any suggestions on how to do reels, that's what I'm learning right now. It's kind of hard, but it's also really fun. Like I said, I'm an open book. I can be a little quirky sometimes. And, you know, I hope that resonates with people.
This is basically me trying to like be a TikTok star. I'm like, well, you obviously have to get a ring light and you have to do whatever. And I'm like,
I know
that came in and my wife was like, what the hell is that for? I'm like, I'm doing makeup tutorials on YouTube.
Exactly.
She's like, what? I'm like, no, I'm just kidding. It was a joke.
Yeah. So I want to have fun with it. I want to have fun with my business. And, you know, if you are a care partner, I mean, I don't know why, but I think there's this shift where people are starting to say care partner instead of caregiver, because they really have to partner with the person with living dementia.
Makes sense.
I am, shoot me your questions. If you have a certain situation that is challenging, if there's a behavioral situation that's challenging, if you have, like I said, a passion or an endeavor, get in touch with me. If you want to have a longer chat, I do the 60-minute consult completely without charge. And then we can go from there. It has to be a good fit both ways. to work together. It really does. And like I said, I am happy. I have so many resources in my back pocket. If you need a referral to something else or someone else, or you need help finding a support group, please get in touch with me. I want to help in any way possible.
Perfect. Well, thanks again for being on the show today.
You're very welcome.
We'll have all of her.
This is such a great show.
Oh, I appreciate that. I paid her to send that. I'm sending her a check later.
Hashtag not sponsored.
That's so great. We'll have all of your information in the show notes. So if you guys didn't catch that before, even though it's the same thing on every single platform, we will, I'll have it in the show notes. So you'll be able to click all of that and do all of those fun things. But to everybody else, thanks for listening. I appreciate it. That was a weird, awkward silence as I try to hit the button. I'm like, where's my button to do this? But you can reach out to me on social media everywhere at flores.run. Subscribe, leave a review of the podcast. Written reviews help a ton. Lets people know kind of what the podcast is about. And if you enjoyed it, and you please do that, because that'd be great and people can find it. You can visit my website at www.flores.run. I'm updating it here soon. There's going to be some really cool things that I have planned for it, a little more interactive and a little more able to reach out to me and stuff like that. But again, Hangry stuff, you guys know it. wearehangry.com. Got some new gear, got some new colors in our t-shirts. You can follow us on social media everywhere at @GetAngryAndHunger. Yeah, I think that's about all I wanted to say there. But thank you for joining me today. Remember to keep running with purpose, one step at a time. We'll see you guys next week.